Microsoft has just hit back at the concerns of world regulators and those like Sony who are opposed to the ABK deal. I know at this point we're all tired of talking about the ABK deal, but let's be honest, we all like this train wreck. So let's tear into another chapter of the biggest buyout in gaming history. Microsoft has met with the European Commission in Brussels at a conference to discuss this whole buyout of Activision Blizzard King for $69 billion. Luckily, community favorite Jez Gordon of Windows Central was there to cover this whole conference, where Microsoft President Brad Smith gave speeches, presentations, and announced deals to those in attendance at the conference. Brad Smith went on stage Tuesday and it seems dropped a bombshell right out the gate with an announced partnership with Nvidia and Nintendo to bring Xbox games and Activision games, if the deal goes through, to Nvidia GeForce Now streaming services and Nintendo ecosystem. This includes a 10-year deal to bring Call of Duty to the Nintendo platform with feature and content parity. Brad Smith even goes into detail on his Twitter page, stating that we've now signed a binding 10-year contract to bring Xbox games to Nintendo's gamers. This is just part of our commitment to bring Xbox games and Activision titles like Call of Duty to more players on more platforms. Nvidia goes into detail on their website, stating that the agreement will enable gamers to stream Xbox PC titles from GeForce Now to PCs, macOS, Chromebooks, smartphones, and other devices. It will also enable Activision Blizzard PC titles such as Call of Duty to be streamed on GeForce Now after Microsoft's acquisition of Activision closes. Phil Spencer states that Xbox remains committed to giving people more choice and finding ways to expand how people play. This partnership will help grow Nvidia's catalog of titles to include games like Call of Duty, while giving developers more ways to offer streaming games. We are excited to offer gamers more ways to play the games they love. Jeff Fisher, Senior Vice President for GeForce at Nvidia, follows up with saying, combining the incredibly rich catalog of Xbox first-party games with GeForce Now's high-performance streaming capabilities will propel cloud gaming into a mainstream offering that appeals to gamers at all levels of interest and experience. Through this partnership, more of the world's most popular titles will now be available from the cloud with just a click, playable by millions more gamers. And they even go into detail on how quickly this is going to happen. Microsoft and Nvidia will begin work immediately to integrate Xbox PC games into GeForce Now so that GeForce Now members can stream PC games they buy in the Windows Store, including third-party partner titles where the publisher has granted streaming rights to Nvidia. Xbox PC games currently available in third-party stores like Steam or Epic Game Store will also be able to be streamed through GeForce Now. Nvidia even doubles down on that last statement on their Twitter page, stating that Xbox Game Studios PC games available on Steam will be the first to be supported, followed by Bethesda games on Steam and Epic Game Stores. Work to support Windows Store will begin immediately, with game releases to follow. Brad Smith points out that this brings Call of Duty and other Activision titles to over 150 million new devices that didn't previously have access to the titles. It's no secret that Nintendo consumers would love to have access to Call of Duty on their preferred console of choice. And now, with the support of Nvidia and this official 10-year agreement with Nintendo, Microsoft is starting to fight back by trying to get ahead of the narrative that owning Activision will somehow hurt competition, lock games down exclusively to the Xbox ecosystem, and stunt the growth of the emerging cloud streaming market. To really outline some of the ideals of Microsoft and how they want to cooperate with other companies in gaming, Brad Smith reminds the European Commission how Microsoft worked with the EU in 2009 to create interoperability between Microsoft and other platforms like Google, which he described as being more complex than what is going on today with the ABK deal. Now at the conference, a fair amount of people and companies like EA, Google, Valve, and others made a 15-minute speech on how they had no issues or some issues with the deal going through. but it's rumored that somehow Sony got a whole 30 minutes to give a big speech on how they feel the deal would hurt the gaming industry. We all know this is a beat around the bush tactic to protect Sony's bottom line and the #1 position that they have in the industry. And it once again turned into a large discussion about Call of Duty. On Jez Gordon's Twitter, it shows a tweet showing Brad Smith standing at the front of the conference giving a speech describing how Sony beats Microsoft Xbox market share globally to the tune of 75% versus 25%. And when it talks about mind share in Japan, it's 96% to 4% when you compare the two. And when you look at the sign in the tweet, it says European Economic Area Marketplace share as of 2022, showing that Sony PlayStation has 80% of the European Economic Area market share, where Xbox is tailing at 20%. To really hammer it home and add insult to injury on Sony's opposition to the deal, Brad Smith holds up the 10-year agreement that he's brought with him just in case Sony is ready to negotiate remedies. But of course, Sony is still not wanting to discuss anything because Sony probably feels that hoping the deal gets blocked is a gamble that's worth the risk. And in my opinion, like any good gamble, it could backfire on them in the end if regulators don't go the direction Sony is hoping for. Another big takeaway we got from Brad Smith's presentation at the conference gives us answers to a question that I even had. Would Microsoft even have an ounce of thought towards the CMA's ideas of divesting or selling off Call of Duty? We've heard in the past from Phil Spencer that Activision with Call of Duty is very enticing, but the real score would be King and how it would give Microsoft an overnight foothold into the mobile gaming market. We all know Microsoft isn't a big player in mobile gaming, but getting King would facilitate Microsoft to becoming a big competitor in that market very quickly. So this led to thoughts and discussions with gaming community members trying to figure out if Microsoft would be happy with only getting Blizzard and King. Well, Brad Smith put those thoughts and discussions to bed, stating, "We don't think it's reasonable or realistic for one part of ABK to be carved out on the topic of CMA divestiture suggestions. This proves Microsoft is heavily interested in King, but also heavily interested in Call of Duty at this point." In closing, I'm just wanting to say that it's good to see that Microsoft is trying to take on their battle with world regulators head on, and they're doing this by trying to increase the reach of the games that Activision and Xbox offer by having cooperative partnerships with companies like Nvidia and Nintendo. But I also want to point out that there is too much of a heavy emphasis on Call of Duty. This game does not encompass all of gaming, and it isn't infallible. I can honestly say that there would be a day in the future, 10 years from now, that Call of Duty is not on the level that it is today or may not even exist at all. It's also good to see that Sony is being put in their place by the competition that Microsoft is giving them, and that they shouldn't be comfortably complacent in their #1 top position on the mountaintop of gaming. But it also kind of reminds me of that time when Microsoft and Epic Games tried to get Sony to cooperate with crossplay, and Sony completely gave them the cold shoulder, like Sony's giving Microsoft right now the cold shoulder on trying to get this deal across the finish line with some remedies that Sony might even benefit from. But when I say competition, I know people aren't going to agree that Microsoft is competing on a level that they agree with, or even that Sony agrees with. But that's the funny part. Microsoft is competing. They're just trying to do it differently. And when it comes to competition, you shouldn't do things the way your competition says you should do it or the way they think you should do it. You should do things on your own terms, on your own time, the way you feel comfortable. And when it comes to healthy competition, when we see heavy competition, we see great things take place in industries with evolution and innovation and the products they create. But when you don't have healthy competition, you honestly see the same issues that you see today in wrestling, where you get the same old product day after day, over and over again, just this endless cycle of repetitiousness, where it's the same product over and over again, and there's no growth and evolution in the industry. compared to when the WWF existed and they were taking the WCW head on very competitively. We saw an amazing amount of growth and competition in the wrestling industry, and that's what I'm wanting to see in gaming. I'm wanting to see growth and competition, innovation, evolution. I want to see the industry grow. I don't want it to be the same old repetitive cycle of just Sony on top, making sure everybody else just stays in their place and that nobody ever challenges them, and then we just get this complacent cycle in the gaming industry. But hey, that's just my opinion. Please tell me your opinion down below in the comments section. Thank you for taking the time to watch this and allowing me to outline the whole Brussels conference with Microsoft and the EC. I am Centurion1307. Please stay positive out there and play what you want, where you want, and thanks for watching.